students in non-traditional situations, such as having a disability, mental illness, or dependent child, can make a successful transition from high school to college by selecting the proper institution and deploying campus resources. This topic is important as the need for education on the resources available can be difficult to find.
The National Alliance on Mental Health reports that 1 in 4 college students have an identifiable mental illness.
A report from the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators states that over 4.8 million students have a dependent child.
According to the U.S. Department of Education, as of 2012, 11% of the undergraduates report having a disability. For these students in specific, it is important that they can express the functional limitations that result from their disabilities and have the ability to advocate for themselves. As part of this process, students should be able to explain where they have had difficulty in the past and how modifications have helped them overcome such problems. According to the National Center of Education Statistics, 84% of all 2- and 4-year institutions accept 504 plans and IEPs from secondary schools as sufficient verification of disability. Because of this, it is important that students are capable of submitting and presenting these documents to their institution and deploying the resources available on campus.
As for students with mental health concerns, according to the National Alliance on Mental Health, of the 36% of students who found information on campus mental health resources, only 42% found the website somewhat helpful. According to Bray B., 87% felt like high school put more of an emphasis on being academically ready rather than emotionally, and Tate E. reports that on college campuses there can be hundreds or even thousands of students to only one counselor. In order to be on the path to successful transition, it takes the students actually going out of their way and deploying campus resources independently due to the limited counselors available, limited education on campus resources for mental illnesses, and lack of emotional preparation from high school.
Similar to the students with mental health concerns that Maya mentioned, the 25% of students with a dependent child struggle to have their needs met, with just 5% of student needs for on-campus childcare being met. And on-campus childcare options are only declining, according to NASPA. Researching and selecting an institution that is the proper fit will help the student avoid unnecessary confusion and stress and help ensure a smooth and successful transition from. In addition, without deploying campus resources and other aids, students with dependent children could end up as part of the 53% who do not graduate with a degree after 6 years, according to the Institute of Women's Policy Research. To reiterate, more than 4.8 million students have a dependent child, so deploying campus resources is important.
Just like students with a dependent child, students with disabilities can make their transition more successful by selecting a campus that provides the proper accommodations for their disability. For example, 48% of all 2- and 4-year institutions provide sign language interpreters or translators, but only 4% of institutions offer independent sliding skill training. Because of the limited resources, it is important that students with disabilities select an institution that can provide the aid necessary for success.
To the information that Zoe presented a moment ago, students with mental illness must use campus resources to succeed in transitioning. According to a report from the National Alliance on Mental Health, however, only 50% of students choose to disclose their mental health history, and disclosure of mental illness is legally required to receive accommodations in college. Therefore, choosing not to disclose mental health history will impede the student's ability to receive the aid necessary. Many students choose not to disclose their mental health history due to the influence this disclosure may have on the faculty's opinions on them.
Similarly, students have no obligation to disclose their disability to their institution, so it is the student's responsibility to disclose this information in order to receive aid. It is also the student's responsibility to ensure that the Individuals with Disability Education Improvement Act of 2004 is being upheld. Because of this act, by the time most students with disabilities are accepted into college, they are likely to have a transition plan and/or to be receiving transition services, which may include evaluations and services provided by the state. In contrast to students with mental health concerns, students with disabilities should have no fear of disclosing their disability, as colleges are not permitted to make what is known as pre-admission inquiry about an applicant's disability status. If an applicant has disability but meets the essential requirements for admission, the institution may not deny the applicant simply because he or she has a disability.
In comparison to resources provided to students with mental health concerns and disabilities, it is more difficult for students with dependent children to deploy campus resources as they are scarce. Due to these limitations, it is imperative to student success in transitioning that students with dependent children research campus resources, financial childcare aids, and other resources available to them before selecting a campus. Comparing different aspects of 2-year institutions and 4-year institutions would be something to consider during selection. For example, the Institute of Women's Policy Research reports that, as of 2011, 55% of public 4-year institutions reported having a campus-based child center, while only 47% of community colleges reported having on-site childcare. Another consideration to take would be the cost of these institutions. Generally, the cost of a community college is significantly lower than a university, but access to resources provided is also lower. All students, but especially students with dependent children, must keep financial burdening, childcare, and available campus resources in mind when selecting a school that is the best fit for them. Ultimately, students with dependent children are responsible for finding campuses that supply the proper resources as well as deploying them.
Just as all students with disabilities must take primary responsibility for their success or failure in college, students with disabilities are moving from a system where parents and school staff were advocates on their behalf to a system where they will be expected to advocate for themselves.
And college freshmen don't feel as emotionally prepared as they thought they were once they entered college, but it takes personal responsibility from the student to make the transition to college as smooth as possible for them through receiving aid for their pre-existing or developing mental illness.